What's up, everybody? Big Herc 916 getting down with Fresh Out. I'm here with my man, Nicholas Rosenberg, the attorney Rosenberg, LA native, and we're kicking it on some legal shit because a lot of y'all don't know what's up with the legal shit. So we're getting into it. And one of the big legal cases going on right now is the Trump Stormy Daniels. And, we were just chopping it up about that. And I find it quite interesting because of, the hush money thing because having worked in the adult entertainment industry, a lot of this stuff goes on. And, girls get calls from producers to go see certain people and they know who these people are and they keep their mouth shut, but it is not like they're pressured to do this stuff. And these girls are already doing it on screen. Some of them with 10 different dudes. So to do it, like these jobs are easy for them because all they're doing is hanging out. So, Nicholas, and from a criminal defense attorney's perspective, looking at Mr. Trump and, what we're seeing on the news and how, you got these people, making such a big thing about this hush money and this and that. What's your take on this whole, Stormy Daniels, Trump, hush money case?
Sure. So to answer the question and unpack the case, I'm going to wear my prosecutor hat. So as a prosecutor, in presenting the case, Trump is charged with 34 counts. Basically, they're fraud-related accounts, falsifying business records. I like to explain that as perjury on paper.
Okay.
Right? So these are crimes of moral turpitude. So the first thing they did is they put on Stormy Daniels. This is Act 1. And in Act 1, we find out about the sexual contact, sexual relationship, and then you put on the election, 2016 election. If this story gets out, it undermines candidate Trump's electability. So you need that to set it up. Now you've got Michael Cohen. They call him the fixer. He's the attorney. He admits to calling up 500 people and basically threatening them. And what he's going to say, and what he has been saying, is that Mr. Trump knew all about the scheme to funnel payments, which are hush money payments to Stormy Daniels and Miss McDougal, as legal fees. And so that is the falsification of records, disguising the hush money payments as legal fees. Now, hypothetically, why not just pay cash? Why have it run through the books? But that's another story. But because there is this paper trail, and by the way, each count carries with it a 4-year max. So at 34 counts, you can see that the jail time could add up. So what the takeaway is, as is very common with powerful people, you mentioned Italian mafia, is that very often the charges that are filed are not that serious, right? They tend to get some minimal charges, but they're going after the person. They're going after the power. They're going after the ex-president.
It's like, I don't know. Not to take either a right or a left side or a Democratic Republican side, but looking at this case, right, and looking at what we've seen, like through all the past presidents and who's had affairs, outside and things we've seen, and just the whole, even the social media side of this, I find it almost like it's almost entertaining. Like you said, you have the first act, which is a Stormy Daniels, and she's talking about, she spanked him with a paper. Just stuff like, like cornball stuff. You're like, really, this is like, you're using this for an individual who's running for presidency, and we have so many other bigger issues, like politically, but you're using this right now during this time when, you're and I'm not trying to mix oranges and apples, but just as an observer from the outside, not even saying I'm voting for either person, but you're talking about a porn star who knows how many other politicians she could have possibly have slept with who were paid her, which those circle of girls, they're there's politicians, they go to different, that's not the first time, most likely. And I'm not saying, I don't know personally, but I know girls and oh yeah, when so-and-so comes to town, we see him all the time. Or, oh, we fly out to this golf tournament. These girls, that's what they do. That's how they make their extra side money. It's easy money, and that's what they do. But you're talking about a situation with a porn girl, and then we have a situation where there's, hundreds of billions being sent over to another country, but yet we're focused on this with all these charges. It's almost like laughable to me, when I look at it. And then, like you said, the paper trail for paying for, a night with a porn girl. I'm like, I've never heard of something like with this much scrutiny. It's just crazy. I mean, it's entertainment, but in your opinion, as a defense, if you're defending this person, what would be your defense for something like this? That in looking at the testimony and just the charges in general, what would be your way of defending Trump in a situation like this?
Sure. Well, so the defense strategy is obviously going to be credibility and knowledge. So Stormy's account, and especially Michael Cohen, who pled to crimes of moral turpitude, false testimony, misleading Congress. He lost his law license in 2018. So the defense is going to paint him as a liar, as a person with a vendetta against Trump, who's willing to testify to anything to get what he wants, right his personal wrongs. They've gone over his finances, and now they're saying, look, you wrote 2 books, you're making money off this Trump story, and now you have to follow through and testify. But remember, Michael Cohen did not get a leniency agreement. He's not a cooperator.
Yeah.
He did time, right? So the other defense strategy is, let's say the jury believes some of this, is you have to isolate your client, Mr. Trump, and say, like Putin says, right? I have so many spies and military people, I don't know what they do. And that's going to be the obvious strategy. Now, apparently there's recorded phone calls, and, as a defense lawyer, people pay me for what I know, but they also pay me for what I can't say, right? Now, we know there are phone calls, I believe, between Michael Cohen and his client. I haven't heard these calls, but I will tell you, and your personal lawyer is the one who's got the most dirt on you, in my opinion, because of that confidant relationship.
Now, because attorney-client privilege, is there a way for them to use that now back against Trump, like, in a sense where that can incriminate him, even though those were private calls, or?
So the answer is this, and it's the same concept in New York where this trial's happening as here. There's something called the attorney fraud exception. So what that basically means is that you can't hire Rosenberg to advise you on how to commit the perfect murder because that's not privileged. So if there's information about planning a crime, that's fair game for prosecutors.
Gotcha.
And so when they raid an attorney's office, they have to have what we call a special master, an independent attorney, thank you, who has to go through all the records and determine what might be fraud or crime related and what is protected.
Gotcha.
So that principle is always present when you have an attorney testifying against a former client.
Got you. So they're trying to say that he, by being employed to cover up, actually was committing, complicit in committing fraud with Trump, or having been involved knowingly, rather than attorney-client privilege. They're trying to pierce that veil.
Correct. And again, when Michael Cohen has already pled, to some extent, that's an acknowledgement that there's more going on. And remember, all of this stuff, so the standard is, there's the black and white law in the penal code, in the textbook. But at trial, these determinations of fact, those are made by jurors. And jurors are humans, and they can be swayed by the emotions. So, are they going to find Michael Cohen credible? He's self-admittedly lied before, and he's been punished for that.
Yeah. So his credibility is pretty much shit.
Well, I mean, it's up to a juror to, and I have a murder trial right now where I have the leading witness as a co-defendant testifying against what he describes as the shooter and the driver, and he's going to have to say, I lied to the cops. That's the first thing he has to say is, yes, I'm a self-admitted liar. But now I'm telling you the truth, because now I'm beating a life sentence, and now I'm getting single digits.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's up to the jury.
The overall case itself, I mean, from a perspective of just like the charge itself, I mean, would you have, in your legal perspective, even thought to think that this would be something that you would see being publicized as a charge against an ex-president?
Well, I think the answer to that goes back to the nature of the charges being crimes of moral turpitude. So remember when Trump was running and he refused to release his taxes, and then Hillary was saying, why won't he do that? And he said, well, I don't pay that much tax. That makes me smart, right? Now, if he were charged with tax evasion, that might be something that voters would consider.
Yeah.
But now he's falsifying business records, allegedly, and some people can make the argument that they're trying to criminalize him to depoliticize him. So that, I see a lot of chatter on social media about issues like that. Now, some people believe that Biden has politicized the Department of Justice, and that's what this is about. This is all witch hunts, and that's, Trump's narrative.
Yeah, I just think, I mean, a lot of it to me is just interesting. And then when I look at, Judge Joe Brown in his commentary, he says something about, they're trying to presidential immunity, but then he's going back and he's saying, well, look, what about all these other presidents who were doing stuff where, they said something about like the Obama, where there was American national, he killed the father, killed the son, basically against there was an actual federal injunction, and, but presidential immunity, he didn't get charged for it and stuff. So, how, they said this could become a slippery slope, because you're using this to try to eliminate an opponent or to create something, which could possibly hinder or eliminate an opponent, but yet there's a lot of things on the other side that kind of still fall into this range if you want to start bringing up all these other, issues. So it just seems to me like people, when you look at it, it's that they're not looking at the total picture outside of emotion. Just look at it as far as from just a neutral standpoint, and if this was anybody else, you know what I mean? But outside of, you don't like a person, It's just, I found it kind of interesting because he made a good point about that. On the other side, he says, well, now you're opening up a door for that to be opened back up.
Right. Well, one thing that's important about the presidential immunity analysis is that the conduct in the hush money case occurred as a candidate before being a sitting president. So assuming somebody has presidential immunity, that would be for acts undertaken while in office. And so I think you see some of that in the January 20th election interference cases. Was that within the scope of presidential duties? It's an interesting case. Now, I read some commentary. Let's assume there's a conviction, and let's assume that judgment is pronounced so that he's sentenced. It's highly likely that there would be an appeal. And so it's unclear what's going to happen between now and Election Day.
Yeah, this is a crazy. Yeah, it's pretty
And
wild.
remember,
Yeah.
there are people who believe, hypothetically, if he were to win, that he could pardon himself.
Yeah. And then there's also been chatter that if it doesn't go favorably in this person, then they can now utilize the same resources to kind of go after other people for similar situations where there's a lot of people that aren't clean. There's a lot of things that you could dig up on different people if you really want to start going down that slippery slope, which who knows where it can lead to. But it's like, I don't know. I look at like when you put something like this at play, and the pendulum swings this way, it could easily swing back the other way. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people don't really think. I don't know if they really look at that, from both sides. So it's just a very interesting case, and I just find for all the attention being put into a porn star, how she got paid, I just find it pretty mind blowing.
Well, like I said, I think the issue is the business record falsification. That's the real issue. Like I said, I mean, I'm
the
just
perjury aspect.
Yeah, I'm just kind of thinking out loud.
Yeah.
If somebody had handed her a little bag filled with 100s, then it would be her testimony versus Trump's. But there's a paper trail here.
And that's what's kind of, I mean, just from like I said, another outsider's perspective, look at him. I mean, dude, you write a check for some ass? Mm-hmm. I mean, who does? You know what I mean? That's kind of like weird. Where it's like, oh, I owe this guy, street gambling, for a dice game. Am I write a check for him? I mean, dude, how do you? That doesn't make sense to me. I mean, that's not very street smart. But these. I mean, it wasn't. I don't know. These people aren't street people, but they're smart people. So I don't know. It just doesn't. Mm-hmm. It doesn't add up. And knowing how a lot of those, I would assume a lot of those transactions would transpire with these type of people coming to entertain these women, I would assume it would be more of an envelope type of situation.
Well, I think the issue, there may have been other, I'll call compensation involved closer in time to the physical affair. But the issue is if Stormy Daniels had come forward and said, look, I had a sexual affair while Mr. Trump was married. Here's what happened. He lured me to a hotel room, whatever it is. That could have affected the election. So the issue is, how much can we pay Stormy to not present her story? And there's a related issue with the National Enquirer. Can we acquire the story in order to bury it? And then they call that catch and kill. So the goal is the prevention of a story coming out. There's another interesting aspect to the case, which is you've got a tremendously high-profile defendant, and is he going to testify? So he said that he will. If he were to testify, what's he going to say?
Yeah.
He has to say whatever Cohen and my employees did, I have nothing to do with it, never knew about it, never signed off on it, no way, and I didn't even know it was happening.
Under the penalty of perjury, so that he's going to be on the stand, which at that the cross-examination comes into play.
Well, that's where some of these recorded phone calls may appear.
Oh, interesting.
And another aspect of the case that's interesting is that despite getting kicked off of Twitter and some of the other social media platforms, defendant Trump still has a tremendous social media following. On Truth Social, he's been very vociferously attacking the judge, members of the judge's family, court staff. So there's the gag order. Now, Trump's not following the gag order, I believe up to 10 times. He's been fined now up to $10,000. So, excuse me, his position is, I'm a candidate for president. I have a First Amendment right to comment on issues affecting my candidacy, including this case. So you are abrogating my First Amendment rights.
Yeah. I don't know. It's almost like I said. When I look at it from Al's perspective, and I look at like some of the what is it? The president of El Salvador and how you talked about our government. He's like, man, it's like we become more of a banana republic than some of those places. When you look at just the political thing and how this is becoming an issue, but it's only one. It's like directed towards one direction. It's just interesting to me. I don't know. I mean, and just from a person, like I said, even if you weren't, favoring either candidate, if you just looked at it from a fair, just what's going on, it's just a weird scenario, So, yeah, it's just something that I wanted to get out there to our audience because from your perspective, how you would see it and how this is going to fare, long term and the elections coming up, and like you said, the ability for a person to defend his character, and knowing that this person's got to go around and, looking for votes. It's just very interesting.
Well, I think it plays out. Each side gets something from this trial. So for Trump, he's able to present himself as a victim of Democrats, as someone who's unfair, being treated unfairly. Unfair is one of the words that he uses a lot. So for him and his base, he's able to solidify his base around him because he is claiming he's being persecuted through the prosecution. Now, the other side of that is people on the other camp. They see this as a chance to vindicate what they believe about Mr. Trump. And if it's not going to be this case, it's going to be this other case. So both sides are benefiting, and obviously the media is also benefiting because there's tremendous interest in this.
Now, on another case side note, and I didn't mention this one to you before, but another Trump case, which I found it's almost like that's why this one almost to me piggybacks off the other case where in New York about the real estate where there was no victims, money was paid back. They said basically falsifying bank documents for loan, inflating your property value. Now, I was reading something where a majority, I can't remember her name, Kellogg, whoever owned the property before, the family who had that estate back in '84 is worth $18 million. Now, for them to say today it was still worth the $18 million, I found it pretty crazy. And they were showing property down there, I think 2.5 or 3 acres, that was worth almost $200 million with no structure on it. So when I see that, and then when they do an assessment like that, which even with the bank, I was talking to somebody in real estate, you cannot assess your own property. They have to have an assessor, real estate, go down there and to value the property. They can't just give you a loan off of which, it's worth this, and they take that, and your paperwork alone gets you the loan. So looking at even at that case, prior to this case, and that whole property value assessment, what was your take on that case? 'Cause I found that I'm like, this is crazy, man. I mean, and every property there, the cheapest, they're like, it's almost $100 million, for a smaller piece of parcel, an acre and a half, 2 acres.
Right. So again, I think the real issue here is moral turpitude. So that's kind of the takeaway.
Okay.
Traditionally, if I'm applying for a loan, there's going to be an independent appraiser, could be somebody who works with the lender, but somebody's going to come out and look at comparables. These are similar properties, look at when they were sold, how much were they sold for, try and say, well, this one was more modern, this one needed renovation, and then that's your appraised amount. So, like you said, you can't just self-state, this is the value of my property. But again, so this is kind of piercing the invincibility of the Trump organization.
Okay.
There's the other instance where Trump's, I believe his accountancy firm said we got nothing to do with it, and his COO, who was in charge of that, he took a deal. Now, it doesn't affect Mr. Trump himself, but it begins to pierce through this invincibility.
Yeah. It's like breaking down your street clique, and trying to go after certain people where the weak links are to kind of like show, hey, this person is not who they say they are, which is, I guess it's a tactic in whatever game they're playing. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So I think it's interesting. A lot of people have made it very significant that this is the first time an ex-president has been prosecuted. And, you go back to the Watergate era with Richard Nixon.
Yes.
And what he did, as soon as the cover-up, remember, it's not even the break-in to the Democratic Party at the Watergate Hotel. It's the cover-up. And that's why he resigned.
Yeah.
So in that case, nothing was criminalized because he preempted it by getting out, and then he was pardoned.
Huh. Yeah.
So we're in uncharted waters.
Yes. Very interesting. Hey, there you have it. Big Herc 916, Nicholas Rosenberg, fresh out.